Sounds good. Thank you, Declan. Okay, morning everybody. For those of you that are returning, great to get the opportunity to talk to you again, and hopefully we're still on good speaking terms. For those of you that were meeting for the first time, I'm conscious I'm probably the third person to say it, but maybe nonetheless a very warm welcome to the course, and looking forward to working with you into the spring and early summer. So very much so welcome aboard. For those of you that don't know me, I see some familiar names and faces, but for those of you that don't know me, my name is Paul Daly. I have taken a sidestep in the last number of years, so I'm now in a different part of the business. But prior to that, I worked for 15 years in both the collections and credit world, mainly collections, but did a couple of years exclusively in credit as well. I worked for Accenture, and I did most of my work with one of our diamond clients, which is still, despite me moving on, is still with us. So I managed a number of different, pretty much all the regions of EMEA at one point or another. Did pretty much all of the lines of business at one point or another. Prior to that, I worked for Philips for a couple of years, and I worked for Oracle way back in the early noughties. So that was where I cut my teeth in the collections business. So plenty of experience in the areas that we're going to cover off for international, okay? Because I've done many phone calls and many discussions, many meetings in pretty much all of the regions that we're going to be covering off, okay? And I suppose most importantly, it is important to say that I've been working with Declan for the last kind of 11, 12 years. And when did I meet Declan? I met Declan because I did the course. So I once upon a time I was sitting where you were sitting, although we were in a non-virtual world back then. So that's where I met Declan, completed the course, and been working with him pretty much ever since. So that's just a quick introduction as to who I am. So what we're going to do for the next kind of 30 odd minutes is I will bring you through just a whistle-stop tour of international credit management. So some of you will have done the other credit management course that we have with us running up into the autumn and up into more recent times. I will take you through the international modules now. So we're not going to go into any, same as last time, we're not going to go into any specific detail. We're going to keep it very high level, but I'll just give you a flavor as to what it is that we're going to be covering off over the next number of weeks. Okay. So I suppose to start off with, just to briefly explain what international business is. So international business can come under a number of different headings. I mean, so that's the first thing we're going to cover off in module one. Obviously, if you stop somebody in the street and ask them, well, what's international business, they're probably going to say it's importing and exporting, which is, I suppose, the most popular types of international business that you would encounter. But it does expand a bit further as well. You can invest in companies that are abroad, either by buying a small number of shares or by owning large portions of companies that are based abroad. But you can also go, if you're a company and you wish to set up abroad, you can also go the whole hog, and you can actually invest in either offices, warehouses, manufacturing facilities, and you can also hire local people to go and work in your company, which obviously is of most benefit to those employees, and then also the government of whatever country it is that you're going to actually do the work in. Okay, so international business can cover a number of different areas. International business is relatively new phenomenon. It began to take off after World War II ended, so kind of 1950 kind of onwards, and then obviously when the internet came around, which is now 30 odd years ago, the international business kind of really began to take off and explode. And in a lot of cases, international business accounts for more than the domestic business of a particular company or even a particular country. And I suppose there's three reasons why international business grew. Firstly, as I said, technology has obviously had a very golden patch over the last kind of 30 years and is really accelerating. So technology has been a big part in it, but a couple of other reasons that international business has expanded is over the last kind of 3 decades or so, the number of middle classes, the size of the middle class economies have grown significantly, particularly in very large countries such as China and India. Okay, so there's a growing middle class, and that means more disposable income, and that means more opportunities to sell products to that growing middle class. So that's one of the reasons. And then secondly, as you might hear if you listen to among other people Donald Trump, if you go to economies like the US or the EU, they have obviously moved a lot of their production out of countries such as the US and the European Union countries, and are now basing it in countries where it is cheaper to manufacture the products that they're looking to do. So those are the three reasons why international business has grown over the last 30 years. Okay. So we're going to cover all that in module 1. We're going to talk about the growth of the services industry as being an opportunity for international business. So, I mean, historically, Ireland's certainly first ventures into international business would have been selling agricultural products, okay? So selling those abroad, okay? And that still remains a very, very key part of our economy. But you only need to kind of drive around the city centre of Dublin to have and look at some of the advertising and some of the buildings that there are there, and you can see that obviously the services industry plays a very big part. So, we have companies such as kind of Google and Meta, where most of the people working in the building don't produce any actual product and maybe don't really do any sort of service to actually customers in Ireland. They're all doing providing service to people abroad. Okay, and if you go into the IFSC, where a lot of the banks are set up, a lot of that business is obviously not domestic; it is international. So they provide banking facilities right round the world to customers. So those are a couple of examples of services. Okay. We're going to take you through in module 1. We're going to take you through who participates in international business. So you do have what is known as a focal firm who will, I suppose, run their international operations from beginning to end. So they will create the product, they will market the product, they'll sell the product, and they will distribute whatever product or service it is to customers who may be many thousands of miles away. But there are also various other players in it as well. There are companies who don't manufacture anything and they're only involved in the actual distribution of a product. So they will get whatever products other companies are selling. They will get them from A to B, wherever A and B may be. There are other companies who specialize in banking, specialize in legal advice, can help companies deal with the customs clearance and the tax implications of selling things abroad. So they will specialize in that. And then you also have obviously the buyers and the governments as well. So I mean, the governments will certainly take a view on how they stand on international business. The Irish government, many years ago, for instance, indicated that they wanted international business, so they set a very low corporate tax rate, which allowed for companies to, which are not actually Irish, to relocate some operations here and to staff them with Irish people, which is beneficial for the country because those employees earn money and then the government earn revenue through tax. Okay, both from the company and also from the employees that work there. Okay. So they're obviously a big player in it as well. We're going to take you through the type of companies. So we mentioned a focal firm a moment ago. There's obviously different types and different sizes of companies that are involved in international business. So if you're talking about international business, you might immediately think of some of the really big companies such as kind of Nestle, Citi, Unilever, DHL, Shell, those type of companies. But there's also plenty of the market available for small and more medium-sized businesses to be involved in international business as well. So you can have people who create or design a service or product literally in their kitchen or their living room, and they can then sell it to customers thousands of miles away. Okay, and they sometimes they grow or sometimes they sell the business on. Okay. And then whoever buys it then grows the business there. Okay. You have what is known as a born global firm as well. Okay. So these are companies that never have any strong intention to service the Irish market in the case of ourselves, but they will actually, they will create something that maybe doesn't necessarily have a massive appeal in Ireland, but might have a massive appeal in bigger countries. Okay, Ireland in terms of size is one of the smaller countries in the world. So if you skip you can skip Ireland altogether and you can market something in France, the size of your market may be an awful lot bigger than it would be if you just market locally. Okay, so there are companies out there that skip Ireland altogether and just go international from day one. Okay, so all of this is things that we're going to be covering in Module 1. The last couple of things we're going to cover is why do firms internationalize? Okay, so the short answer essentially is money, but they may internationalize because the market is maybe overcrowded in Ireland or is declining in Ireland. And they might say, okay, well, it's declining here, but it is growing in some other part of the world. So let's expand into that and see what we can do in terms of making our margins there. It can be because as I said earlier, to locate lower cost materials in cheaper it can be to locate lower cost materials, or it can be to locate lower cost workforce that companies internationalize. And it can also be if a key customer goes abroad, sometimes companies will follow and say, okay, well, if they're going to set up a presence in France, then we better set up a presence in France as well, because they are one of our key customers. So all of that that's a quick flavor of all of the kind of things we're going to be covering off in Module 1. Okay. Any questions as I take a sup of coffee? Any questions, any of that?
No, all good.
No, super, great. Okay, so if we move on to Module 2 and most of Module 3 in International Credit Management course is it covers the same areas. Okay, so what we are doing in Module 2 and most of Module 3 is we are going to talk to you about some of the largest markets in the world and give you a flavor as to what it is like to work with the people in those markets. You may have had an opportunity previously to work with people from the US or from France or the UK. So we're certainly going to cover those three, but we're also going to go further afield. We're going to tell you what it's like to work with people from China, to work with people from India, to work with people from Japan, and to give you a flavor, and even all the way to Australia, and give you a flavor as to how to work with those people. Okay, so inevitably, I'll give the disclaimer from the beginning. There is inevitably an element of stereotyping in the in the notes, okay, which is inevitable. I mean, if you take America, for instance, I think there's the guts of 300 million people in America. Obviously, they're not all the same, okay? But in general, we will give you a flavor of, I said, okay, if you are working with people from the US, this is what you can potentially expect. And we're going to break it down into a number of different criteria, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a flavor of the background of the country. So we will not only explain to you, okay, say the Americans are like this, but we'll give you some background as to why the Americans might be like this, or why the Chinese might be like this, or why people from India might be like this, okay? So we'll give you a background of the history of the country and give you an understanding based on that background as to why, as to what people in those countries tend to be like in general when you're working with them, okay? So that's the first thing we're going to do, and that's broken up into 20 different countries, okay? The next thing we're going to give you, which is very important from a credit and collections point of view, we're going to tell you what the national holidays are in those countries, okay? Which is very, very useful information, okay? If you've ever tried to collect money from the Middle East during Ramadan, or if you've ever tried to call customers in France or in Italy in the first 2 weeks of August, you will understand as to why it is important that you plan ahead for those type of events, okay? Because you can ring or you can send all the emails or the dunning letters that you want, but you're going to find it quite difficult to collect money if nobody is actually there, okay? So we're going to give you a breakdown as to when the key holidays and the key times, the key downtimes are in a particular country. We're going to talk to you about how best to communicate with the people in the country. And communication comes in two forms. So we're going to break it down into those two forms. There is the verbal communication, okay? And then there's the non-verbal communication. So if we take the verbal communication, first of all, some countries, the people from those countries can be very direct, okay? All right. One of the key themes that runs through the American part of the module is the time is money, okay? So they will people from the US tend to cut to the chase fairly quickly and try to establish, okay, how am I going to make money from this person that I'm dealing with over the phone, over a Zoom call, or in person? How am I going to make money out of them? Okay, so they will cut to the chase and they'll be fairly quick and can at times be abrupt. Okay, if they feel that there is nothing to be gained from a business relationship with you, they may cut you off fairly quickly. Okay, there may be other nationalities, however, who will work with you, who will be quite polite, quite pleasant, they may have no intention actually of working with you, but they may be quite pleasant and might it might be quite some time before there is any sort of discussion about kind of moving away from a business relationship. So they will be a lot more quiet. They will be a lot more quiet and maybe a lot slower to let you know what they think. Okay, so you need neither of which is wrong, but you need to know which how to deal with it and notice the signs of what people are they going to move away from business relationship and not do business with you, in which case you may want to cut your ties, or are they not. Okay, so we're going to take you through the direct form of communication. Okay, we're also going to talk to you about the non-verbal forms of communication. Okay, so some countries, even if we just take greetings, okay, how you are greeted in some countries might be through a handshake. Other countries, they may kiss on the cheek. Other countries, they may bow to you when you greet people. Okay, none of those are right or wrong, but it is good to know. It is good to know what to expect and what is the correct way to greet people. Should you wait for them to approach you first? Should you go and introduce yourself to them immediately? You will find, for instance, if you go into a meeting room in the US, it's unlikely you're going to be left alone for very long. Very quickly, people will come over to you. Okay, there may be other cultures where people will wait to be introduced to you before they will look to talk to you. Okay, so you need to know which way the country that you are dealing with is likely to behave. Okay. A very important one that we're going to cover is how to conduct meetings. Okay. In meetings, in some places in the US, for instance, if you say 9 o'clock, you would be expected to kind of start the meeting at 9 o'clock. Okay, everyone's ideally would probably have their coffees by then, sit down and be ready to go at 9 o'clock. There may be other countries where if you start at 9 o'clock, you might be the only one there. Okay, all right. So you need to know how to conduct meetings. How do you do introductions at meetings? How do you handle objections in meetings? What is the protocol in the particular country? Do you start with the most senior person and work your way down? Do you allow everybody free rein to talk evenly? There are different ways of conducting meetings in different countries. Okay. And then finally, we're all going to take you through some of the do's and don'ts of the countries. Okay, so each country tends to have their own history. Every country obviously has their own history. Some countries have parts of their history that they're very proud of. There are other parts of their history that maybe they're less proud of. Okay, maybe they've been the victim or the aggressor of some conflict in the past. It can be best not to maybe bring those discussion points up. Okay, an easy one in terms of a comparison is if we stick with the US, is something like gun control. Okay, people that are in favor of the right to bear arms feel very strongly about it. And then there are others who would feel very strongly in the other direction. Given the part of the country that you might be in, that might give you some clues as to what way they might be, but not necessarily always. They may not thank you too much for if you're an outsider for bringing your views forward on it. So that's just one example, but across all of the countries there are topics to kind of things to do and then topics maybe to avoid, and certainly unless you know the people quite well. So we're going to take you through all that as well. Okay. So there's a lot of information on, as I said, there's 20 countries. So we're going to bring you through. There's going to be 12 of them covered off in module 2, and then the remaining 8 are covered off in module 3 and take up most of module 3 as well. Okay, but those are the different categories that we're going to take you through in relation to each country. They tend to be the biggest economies in the world. Okay, so the ones where you are most likely to be doing business. Okay. So there is a second part to module 3, which I'm going to come to in a minute, but just in terms of that, module 2 and the first part of module 3, are there any questions on any of that?
20 countries, Paul. You said 20 countries.
20 countries, yes, 20 countries.
How do you deal with the language barrier from China and all these different countries?
Well, in terms of the language, well, I suppose we're working off an assumption that you're going to be dealing primarily in English, okay? Although there are sections on each module which kind of mention whether or not it might be worth kind of, it does mention whether or not they are likely to speak English or not, okay? Which is an important thing to keep in because, that is a barrier, okay? It's all well and good to kind of say, well, we can go into China and we're going to make a whole packet of money, okay? If the people that you're going to be working with are not likely to speak English, are not likely to speak English and you don't speak any Chinese, you're immediately going to, that's not to say you can't go and make the buckets of money that you're planning on making. But you need to take that into consideration before you go into it. So we will cover all of that in there. Okay. But we will give you guidance as you're going along as to how likely it is, because some countries are quite likely to speak English. Some countries are less likely to speak English. Some countries will react very well if you even have, as they say in Irish, the cúpla focal, okay, and you give a little bit of a go. Some countries react very well to it. Others will kind of immediately go, no, I speak English, so they'll look to move on quickly enough. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? No? Okay. So there is a second part to module 3, okay? And this is to deal with the risks of doing business in a country, okay? Because it's all well and good to kind of say, I mean, there are billions of euro out there to be made across the world, okay? But not all of it, but none of it comes without some degree of risk, okay? So what we are going to do is we're going to cover off in the second part of module 3 the 4 key risks that you need to take into consideration before you go and expand internationally, okay? And the first one is country risk, okay? And country risk comes under a number of different headings. I'm not going to go through them all, but just to give you a couple of examples. A very key one that might jump out immediately when you think of risk is security, okay? There may be millions of dollars to be made in a particular country, but if that country is potentially a war zone, you need to take that into consideration, okay? That's not to say you necessarily can't do business there. Okay, you can. Okay, there are companies that deal with countries and make lots of money in countries that are potentially quite dangerous. So you might immediately kind of say, well, there's no way I'm going there. But you do need to build in the security element to it. You may need to pay for local security. You may need to assume that 10% of your product is going to be written off through theft. There are certain things like that. So security is one. I'm just going to randomly jumping around the list that I have in front of me. What's the labor market like? Okay. There's no point you saying, okay, right, we're going to set up this company here and we need 1,000 people and we're going to pay a certain level of salary and then and say, so based on that, we're maybe assuming that we're going to hire a lot of people at the beginning of their career and then find out, well, actually, this is a very aging population in this country. Most of them are well into their careers already. They're unlikely to go and to go and accept a job that maybe is appeals to an entry level people. How strong are the unions in a particular country? Okay, can will unions look to operate in do they currently operate in your sector? How strong are they? Could they paralyze your business if they don't like the terms and conditions that are being put in front of them? What's the government like in a particular country? Are they pro-business? Okay, are they open? Like I said in the Irish example earlier, are they open to international firms coming in? The Irish government certainly is now and has been for quite some time. But there are other countries out there, and again, I'll maybe use the Donald Trump kind of scenario. It kind of says, well, why should money be leaving the country? It should be staying in the country. Okay. So you need to ask yourself those type of questions. So those are a couple of examples of country risk. And we cover all of that off in module 3, okay? So that's the first one. The second one is, if I go on down, the second one is currency risk, okay? So how strong, or I suppose the key thing is how volatile is the currency, okay? If by its nature, credit involves, buying now and paying later, okay? That is one of the fundamental principles of credit, okay? But there's no point in agreeing a deal now that's worth $1 million and say, right, that is worth $1 million, and say, right, we were going to set credit terms at, say, 90 days. In 90 days, $1 million in the local currency is almost certainly not going to be worth the same as it is today, okay? It may have gone up, it may have gone down, okay? So you could be quids in, and instead of getting $1 million, you walk away with 1.2, or it can go the reverse. And instead of you've done a deal of what you think is $1 million, and actually in reality, by the time it comes around to getting paid, the $1 million when the local currency is converted is now only worth 800,000. Okay. Now, if it's worth 800,000 and your costs are only 100,000, you're still fairly profitable. But if your costs are 900,000 and you were hoping to get the extra 100,000 to make a profit, you're now suffering a loss of 100,000. Okay. So we're going to talk to you about, there's a number of things you can do to stop that. And we're going to talk to you about those in module 3. There is commercial risk, okay, some of which would have been dealt with in the credit management module for those of you that are returning students, okay? So commercial risk internationally is the same as commercial risks at home, okay? You put the wrong manager in charge, you've marketed to the wrong people, you've priced it incorrectly, your marketing campaign is wrong, okay? So, you know, those are all risks that you can have even if you only operate within Ireland, but they can be exaggerated even further if you are abroad, okay? For instance, if you hired the wrong manager in the US and that manager is making an absolute disaster of your business, what you can probably do is you can probably just fire them, okay? Because that's the way things work in the US, okay? You may be able to just fire them, okay? Now you may get sued. That's another way the way things work in the US, but you can certainly fire them pretty easily, okay? It is more difficult in other countries in the European Union, and it may be nigh on impossible once you go beyond that, okay? If you've appointed somebody who might be maybe a very important person to the government in that country, you may find it very difficult to just cut them loose, okay? So the third thing we're going to cover off in module 3 among the risks is commercial risks. So we're doing country risk, currency risk, commercial risk. And then the last one that we have is cross-cultural risk, okay? And that is one of the reasons that we have all of the details in module 2 and the first part of module 3, okay? We're trying to reduce the cross-cultural risk. The cross-cultural risk being, okay, you are, you know, you might be a very strong communicator to other people in Ireland, but you may communicate in a way that the French, which might be the market you're going into, you know, that does not appeal to the French. Maybe you're too direct, not direct enough, whatever it is. There may be things that you do cross-culturally that do work in Ireland, work very well in Ireland, but do not work so well in whatever market it is that you're trying to go into, okay? And the very first, there's a number of things that we will tell you what to do to minimize your cross-cultural risk. But the very first thing you need to do is read module 2 and read module 3 so that you know what it is like to do business in Japan, India, China, and so on. Okay.
Okay.
So all of that is covered off in module 3. So let me see, in terms of time, what am I on? I am on 28 minutes. So I will give you, I have one more module to do, which I will do fairly quickly. Once I get it open. So need to keep on schedule. Declan prefers when we keep on schedule, don't you, Declan? So in terms of module 4, what we have in module 4 is we have a number of different topics to close out the international credit management module. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, I'll just list them off for you here. First thing we're going to talk about is contact strategies. Okay, so do you locate, if you're going to have a team of collectors, do you locate them all in Ireland and hire people who speak a number of different languages, or do you have them scattered across Europe in the number of different countries, or beyond in the number of different countries that you're going to do? How are you going to go and contact your customers? Everybody in one office in Dublin or somewhere else in Ireland, or are you going to have a number of different offices scattered across EMEA and beyond, and contact them there? Okay. Customer visits, how are you going to handle your customer visits? Are you going to have people based locally? We did cover off customer visits in the domestic credit management module, but we are going to revisit it for one very important reason, which is when you're dealing with international customer visits, you know, you tend to be dealing with planes and hotels, so the cost of it goes up. Okay, so you do need to make sure that you're getting a good return for your investment. We're going to cover off letters of credit. Okay, so I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, there are risks all over the place. You know, that's not to say, you know, international business is a wonderful thing. And it is very valuable, and that's why companies do it, okay? But one way of managing the various risks that we call that are things like things called letters of credit, whereby you say, okay, if the 90 days have elapsed and I am unable to get payment for the debt that I am owed, there is an option to use a letter of credit, which basically is a guarantee for the payment. Okay, you send that letter of credit to the bank, and the bank will release the funds that you were expecting. Okay, and that can be for the entire debt of say $1 million that you may have agreed to get paid, or you might look for it to cover maybe just your losses or whatever. So you can have a partial letter of credit that covers everything, or you can have a letter of credit that covers sum of what you're expecting to get back from the customer. Okay. We're going to take you through country by country some of the legal systems in these countries, not all 20 of them, but we will take you through some of the bigger ones. Okay, so is the legal process efficient? Is it are you required to act very quickly? Do you have time on your side? Is it going to be a quick resolution, or is it likely to take a number of years? So we will give you some guidance as to how to manage the legal systems. And then finally, the last thing that you can use other than letters of credit to minimize the risk is what is known as credit insurance, okay, where you can pay a certain value, and then as long as you fulfill certain conditions, in the event that that you have not been paid, you can potentially apply for credit insurance. You can potentially activate your credit insurance and use it to cover some of the debts that you may have. So if you're going into high-risk locations, now they may be so high risk that the insurance company says, well, there's no way we're doing business there. They may be so high risk that they won't do it. But if you can find insurance companies that are willing to, subject to certain terms and conditions, insure some of the debts that you're going to be incurring, you can use that, and that is a source of getting your money back if you wish to avail of it. So 2 minutes over. I suppose was lost in my introduction, but to myself. Unless there are any last questions on it, I will hand you back to Declan.
Well, what I'll do is I'll just, in case you're camera shy, I'll stop the recording there, and then you can ask your questions without being on the record.